biggest opportunity for IT since IT. So last year, organizations had to tighten their belts in response to the pandemic. So global IT spending actually shrunk by 3.2%. But this year, Gartner is saying it's going to rise to 6.2%. So the good news for our industry is that it's more critically important to the success of our organizations than ever before. So many of the initiatives that were put on hold last year, like hiring staff, updating infrastructure, rolling out new products, all that stuff's going to be kickstarted again. But there'll be a significant distribution in the way that IT spends money. So there's going to be greater investment in security, supporting employees working from home, cloud-based infrastructure, and local platforms that make it easier to automate and integrate processes. However, for many IT groups, that's going to come at the expense of data centers, local IT infrastructure, and even IT staffing. So we really need to be showing value that's highly visible. So this stat from Gartner suggests that the big working from home experiment has been a great success. So we do miss the office camaraderie, but most of us do prefer to work from home. Cardiff University did some research which found that 88% of employees want to continue working from home in some capacity, and 47% want to do it often or all of the time. So Grant Thornton last month actually produced a report said that 40% of mid-sized UK companies are expecting to reduce their office space. And basically 74% of those are looking to decrease it by up to a quarter and a further 12% by up to a half. So with such a radical transformation underway, we have to ask ourselves whether the old ways are still fit for the kind of new ways and the new solutions and the value that we need to deliver going forward. So now we do need to deploy these solutions that are fit for the new normal. So the old ways, we had this mythical separation between IT and business strategy, but if we keep that up, we're going to fail to deliver value. And if we can't move fast enough, we are going to be the limiting factor of the change that we're not only meant to facilitate, but lead. But digital transformation, it leapt forward a decade over the last year, and it's reshaping entire markets. So now with everything possible moving to the cloud, offerings like device or desktop as a service, they're legitimate competition. And outsourcing, that's on the rise too, because in Q3 and Q4 of last year, the value of UK outsourcing contracts increased by 60% compared with the previous year. And shared services are already on the increase as well. So organizations are just pooling resources to save costs and enabling efficient service delivery teams to absorb the user base of poor performer. So the writing's on the wall, folks, and we need to do something about it. And what is that? I believe there's never been a greater opportunity for IT to drive change in organizations. But to be honest, we have no option but to do that. McKinsey did a paper last year which said that 4 out of 10 business executives believe that IT is significantly or fully replaceable by third parties. Now, IT leaders didn't have the same opinion. They had an 80% difference in opinion. But what I would say is post-COVID, IT groups that were perceived at a cost are going to have further cost and efficiency imposed upon them. But IT teams that are seen to be adding value, they'll be trusted to lead. So it's all about what you do next. But you might be doing a great job with making improvements to IT, but are you really getting value and adding value to get you noticed? If your colleagues are struggling with things that you've long since resolved, that's your opportunity there to add value quickly. Because every day your employees are engaging with a multitude of different services from different business units. So whether it's IT, facilities, legal, but accessing those services, they're forced through different channels and inefficient siloed working practices, disjointed processes, disparate systems, reliance on email and spreadsheets. So that means that employees have no visibility of the status of their requests, and they get lost productivity and a poor service experience. At the same time, service delivery teams are swamped with unnecessary interactions. So ESM, it is without a shadow of a doubt the biggest opportunity for IT since IT. Now we've been talking about this since back in 2005. I think we coined the term enterprise support platform. But at that time the technology was older, configuring solutions for different business units wasn't easy, and upgrading it was a mission. But today things are really, really different. So our no-code platform allows IT folk to configure, automate, and integrate pretty much anything with a few clicks, and Steve will show you that in a moment. So it's so simple that typically what happens is IT starts helping out a department to solve a problem. Then they transfer complete ownership of the solution to leave other teams in charge of their own destiny. So there's no upgrade pains, incremental updates just get pushed out all the time. It's just like updating Facebook on your phone, turns on automatic updates, it just happens in the background, and customizations keep working. So in this new remote world, the ability for employees to access self-service and for teams to automate those service interactions, that's going to be the difference between surviving and thriving. So what I wanted to do is just basically showcase some of our customers. So this one's the University of Portsmouth, and they're managing about 150 services. And as they say here, they're adding value right across the business. I mean, that's where it's at. We need to be seen to be adding that highly visible business value. And they're a fairly large organization with 50,000 end users, but this is also applicable for smaller organizations. Here, Secure Trust Bank, they basically have it rolled out across multiple teams. I mean, you can see the list there under ESM usage. And again, Waltham Forest Council. So I just wanted to highlight this one. We started with IT here, and as the top quote says, it's a powerful approach to configuring business processes, not just for IT, but any business service can be automated and presented to customers in an easy customized catalog. The bottom quote here is from one of their HR teams. They actually implemented this themselves. IT just gave them a head start, and off they went in charge of their own destiny. But to give you some idea of that highly visible business value, here are the results that they actually got within 6 months of deploying this themselves. So employee satisfaction up by 22%, dissatisfaction down by 29%, time to recruit reduced by over a third, information duplication halved, and about 72% reduction on the forms they needed to actually process the recruitment process. Now, what that means for us is that actually our customers are getting really good value, and they positioned us as the #1 vendor in 3 markets: IT service management, service desk, and customer self-service in Europe. And our net promoter score here is pretty much double that of any vendor on the G2 platform. So it's good. You know, we're helping customers and we're actually making life and work better, and that's been reflected in the scores that our customers are giving us. So what I want to do now is just hand you over to Steve. I think I can transfer. So Steve, if I can just give you that, Steve will carry on and show you a little bit about how Hornbill actually does all of these things.
Perfect. Thanks, Pat. So as Pat said, I really just want to spend a few minutes sort of evidencing some of those concepts that Pat's introduced and how we do that in Hornbill. So first and foremost, as Pat mentioned, any internal service provider can define, configure and publish the services that they offer through a single self-service, single destination for your common customer, internal or external in that context. All of those services that you provide, as Pat mentioned, can be underpinned by process automation. That could be supported where applicable with automation, whether that be with cloud services or behind the firewall, you know, whether that's user account creation, moving people in and out of groups, or a whole multitude of different automations. We can remove those manual repetitive tasks on the platform. Hornbill does provide a suite of line of business applications that each of those internal service providers might look to utilize, and I'm going to focus pretty much squarely just on request fulfillment inside Service Manager for the moments that we've got today. So all that really means, as Pat mentioned, it's about the services that you provide, and it's about the different teams that provide them. So here we've got Graham. Graham's one of our IT service delivery managers and responsible for services like desktop support, printers, mobiles, or home working, as Pat mentioned earlier. So I'm just going to go into one of these services because there's some key concepts that are worth just touching on. First and foremost, this service is supported by these IT teams. That means that only the members of those teams will be able to see tickets that are raised against that service. They'll be the only teams that can have those tickets assigned to them. They're the only ones that will see those tickets, search for them, report on them, etc. So that's important, where we need to have still some lines of, if you like, separation between those different service providers on the same platform. Of course, where they need to collaborate, we can expand those supporting teams to include HR, facilities, etc. Of course, the common customer can be defined by subscriptions, and we can start to build out the content that those subscribed users will see, whether it's an IT or other service. So news and information, knowledge in the form of FAQs or documents, and ultimately, potentially a request catalog of the things that a user who subscribed to that service might be able to ask for or report. Each of those items obviously presented in non-technical terms with its own data capture form and its own business process that's going to take care of routing, It's going to take care of timers, tasks, approvals, and the automations that are needed. Now, of course, in Graham's world, that's all about instance problems and changes. However, if we come down here and have a look at Sue, Sue's one of our HR service delivery managers, so no interest in any of the IT services, so they're not visible to her, but the services that she's responsible for, benefits, employment, payroll, etc., are. And if we go into the My Benefits service, here we can see obviously it's just the HR benefits team that are supporting that particular service. Whereas if we contrast that with a Manage My Talent or Joiners, Movers, Leavers process, we can see here that the members of these teams, support, facilities, and HR can all have visibility of the tickets that are being raised against that particular service. Now, of course, as we mentioned, Sue's not interested in incident problems and changes predominantly. She's probably much more interested in how she can streamline that recruitment process, how she can enforce process in the grievance procedures. And again, the Hornbill platform just allows each of those teams to construct and build not only the workflows, but the visual representation of the tickets that are running against those workflows that are relevant to them. Ultimately, though, we want to surface those services up into a single destination and allow that common customer to be able to consume and start to engage with those teams in a consistent manner. So I'm just going to log in here manually as Tom. Of course, we could support transparent single sign-on, language support, that's all there for you. Now, Tom will get a personalised experience based on the services that he's subscribed to from any of the internal service providers. The pages structure we're looking at is widget driven, so you can completely configure and customise it as you see fit. We're getting some consolidated news published up to Tom from any of those service providers, and we can just see some simple navigation to where I might go to engage with those teams. Each of those views that we're now looking at here will be configurable by each of the teams that provide that area. So IT, for example, might provide some quick actions and promote impacted services and talk about the critical infrastructure that's available or not in this occasion. Whereas if we look at our facilities, IT or HR colleagues, if we look at HR in this context, they might be sharing the most pertinent and useful links, making the HR policies front and center, making access to those services for that user visible. Home working, as again Pat mentioned here, you might spin up an initiative just to provide the relevant content for the users that work from home in terms of contact information, options, policies, and internal and external assets. But if we come back to HR, I just wanted to touch on 3 quick things that are going to demonstrate some of the efficiencies we can gain. So Pat talked about the old way of working and how teams are having to work with emails and spreadsheets. People are always going to want to ask questions, but we can have that provided in the same place. So if I want to ask a question about, for example, when can I retire, we can do that in the same places where I'm making requests for equipment or reporting issues. The underlying process will then, of course, route that to the team that can fulfill that request, and they can do a one-click response and it will close, if we haven't already provided that as an FAQ or some knowledge that we want to share. Secondly, though, and talking about how we can reduce or even eradicate the amount of paper forms that are involved in our recruitment or onboarding, or how we can reduce down the amount of elapsed time, we can start to look at how we can streamline inquiries for benefits that an employee is entitled to, how they might want to enroll in some of the company schemes. So for here, for example, the cycle to work scheme, we can put front and center all the information the user needs. If the scheme is being provided by an external provider, in this case, the cycle to work scheme here, we can share the video and the content and the information. They can review that video. If that helped them and they completely understood it and they're ready to apply, then we can get their acceptance here. We can make sure they understand what that means from a salary sacrifice perspective, and we can get that here. Equally, we can let them know. So again, if you're happy, great, let's proceed. If you're not, let's talk to you. Let's find a convenient time to do it. But if they are happy, we've reduced the interactions, we've reduced the time for them to get to the point where we can then say, right, that's great, you're happy, you've reviewed it, you've accepted the implications of that. So what we'll do now is we'll send you the information you need to register with that external provider. We'll give you the employee code that you need, and once you bring that back to us, then we'll get into the second stage. But the amount of forms that we've removed, the amount of time that we've saved is really the key element. And of course, here we can see in the background, the email with all the information and the code they need can all be sent automatically to them. The third and final example I just want to touch on here is how we can have those internal teams working together collaboratively, and how we can interweave some automation into that. So let's assume that we've done our recruitment and we now need to onboard. That onboarding could have come from HR or it could have come from line manager. But let's just put in here that we've got Kate that's joining us in a particular role, joining us on a particular date in a particular department at one of our sites with some equipment and some access to the apps that she needs. Now, obviously, when that comes in, you know, IT are going to need to do their bit, facilities are going to need to do their bit. But again, all in the spirit of reducing those manual repetitive tasks, in the background, we can go off and we can automate the creation of that user in, be it Azure AD or on-prem AD. We can add them to the relevant roles they need. We can sync up with through AD Connect and have them populated into Office 365. We can create them on Hornbill. We can give them the roles and the groups that we need. So if we've got here Kate that's joined us, if we come over to our AD on here, we can see at the moment that Kate isn't a member of AD, but if we just give that a refresh, we can see that she's now been added in automatically to our AD. But if we come back and look at the rest of the fulfillment side of this, which is going to be driven by our internal teams, we can see if we come in here as Graham, our IT persona, that request has actually been routed, in this case, to the IT team. Here he can see also the automations that have happened, but also these parallel manual tasks that are requiring some completion. So this might just be simple things like configuring equipment, off the back of which we might then know which equipment to deploy software to, and we can automate that. And again, you know, we might be issuing a mobile or not in that scenario. Ultimately, though, that's been very IT centric. If we need our colleagues in facilities to come in and also, you know, provide security permits and parking permits for this new starter, then we could, of course, have created subtasks within the same request. What we can also do, though, if we want to give those guys a bit more autonomy and independence, is we can actually automate and spawn a linked ticket to this request. So John, in this example, who's our facilities persona, can have been notified about that new starter, but most importantly, just the elements that he's concerned with, just the information that he needs. So in the details section here, we're just providing him who, where, when, and what they need, so that the facilities team can work with their own process in terms of issuing security permits. They can build those processes and manage them as they see fit. Once we've done the security pass, we can then move on and we can complete the parking permit as part of that onboarding. Now, because we've spawned that from a parent ticket, all of the work that John's doing, all of the updates that he's adding as on here will also be added to that parent ticket. So from an audit perspective, you've got a full history of everything that's happened on either linked tickets, subtasks, whatever it may be. And in the end here, it's going to come across and it's also going to mark this parent ticket as being completed as a result of the child ticket being finished. Now, the last thing I'm just going to touch on, if we're going to the effort of doing this, of course, Hornbill provides reports and dashboards and metrics, and we do this in the way that you can also create your measures that you need to align to your key performance indicators. So your counts, your percentage, your average resolution time, first time fix, and you can do that across all your teams so that you can then surface up how your teams are doing against those key performance indicators that you've agreed with the business, whether that be the backlogs, the customer feedback, average response times. We can see how each of those teams are contributing. So at that point, I'm just going to pause and pass you back to Pat and see if we've got any questions.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. So my next bit was just basically to give you the contact details for myself and for Steve and to say thank you very much for this. And I don't know if we have got time for questions. I'll bring David back in.
Thank you, gents. Yeah, we've got a few minutes actually. Now, there's nothing come through directly. If you've got a question you'd like to ask right now, please do. I'm still interested in that move to where we're going around DSM and what it really means, and the engagement that you're seeing maybe with you know, your traditional customer in other departments. How is that working out for you? How are you seeing the guys in IT bringing other parts of the business to you to sort of explore, discuss, or are you seeing other parts of the business coming to you direct and ask what's all this about, or are you not seeing that, and is it just happening organically? What type of things happening there, guys?
All of the above, actually, I'd say, David. Well, typically, I mean, in the cases I mentioned to you, we'll say in Walton Forest case, they started off with IT and then they thought, hold on a minute, HR's got this problem, can we help them solve it? And they kind of set them off by just solving one challenge, and then kind of they took ownership of it themselves. I mean, there's no code at all in this. There's nothing to do, just point and click stuff. We're also seeing a similar thing with one of our customers, for example. So you've seen the boards that Steve demonstrated. Well, Darren from Vinci he's got his service delivery teams basically recording what he calls opportunities. So if you find something going on with another department where they think IT might need help, he has an opportunity board, that Kanban style thing. And when they've got time, they go through those various opportunities and show teams how to resolve stuff. So it's not, if you bring them a big system and a big overhead, they're actually going to shirk away from it. But if you can show them how to solve a particular challenge, show them how easy it is to do, then they take over themselves. And that's what has to happen here. Teams need to be in charge of their own destiny. They don't need projects and partners and technical gurus. This stuff has to happen organically, and they have to have ownership.
Mm. And what does that mean for the way in which we position what IT is and tools, right, to a community? How do you see that changing the community? What will the community look like that we serve in the next 5 years?
I think, personally, I think what will happen is you'll see kind of a decentralization of IT's role. So I'm projecting 5 years forward here. And what I eventually see is that you have IT largely as a central IT function in control of central services and basically doing things with suppliers, setting up solutions, etc. But I think what you'll have is you'll have IT people or technology people basically assigned to various different within business units themselves. They understand the technology. They also understand the challenges that the business unit is facing as their job to make sure the central IT services are doing what's required of them. So that to me is where it's heading. I don't know if you think that that's a likely outcome, but certainly it looks that way.
And let's just, we've got a couple of minutes, right? And I think we might come on to some of this actually when we discuss in the breakout, Pat. That's probably what we're seeing actually. If you're seeing that decentralization and the push towards putting more localized services sort of embedded in teams. Now, if that's part of an internal service, or if that's part of a service provider, outsourcer, adding that level of granularity and sort of face-to-face support. I mean, we've gone around cyclically, haven't we, a little bit in that case, because we've got the IT guy in the same room, and yeah. Is that, yeah, which is really interesting. I think it sort of creates the potential for better service, and what it means then for when people talk about service management, what it means to the rest of the organization, how they adopt that as sort of centralized practices that become their everyday work. But I think we might touch on that, Pat, as I mentioned, when we come on to our session a little bit later, if that's okay.
Yeah, perfect. Great.
Well, that's great, guys. You know, it's a very interesting topic, and one which I think a lot of our listeners will be trying to understand and you know, tie down to what it means to their organization as they move forward as well. So thank you for that. We'll speak a little bit later. Thank you very much indeed. And now, well, it's time for a well-earned break. It's a time to grab a coffee and grab a tea. So we've got around about 10 minutes. Please join us at midday when we have our next presentation from Sunrise Software, and we'll see you then. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Consultant at Sunrise Software.